The envelope was heavy in Jasmine's hands. She turned it over slowly, her breath catching when she saw what was inside. Photographs. 6 of them. All of her. Leaving her apartment, walking to the construction site, laughing with contractors, and on every single one, drawn in red ink that looked too much like blood, were crosshairs, perfectly centered, right over her heart. The note attached was simple. Building something new? Shame if it all came crashing down. Jasmine's hands started shaking. The photos slipped from her fingers, scattering across the concrete floor of what would soon be Rose and Lotus. Her dream, her future, her fresh start. 3 months of peace. 3 months of pretending the past was buried. And now, someone wanted to remind her, in Kim Jae-sung's world, nothing stayed buried for long. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, but she knew exactly who it was. "Don't go anywhere, I'm coming to you." "Jay." Jasmine looked at the crosshairs on the photographs, at the half-built kitchen that smelled like sawdust and promise, at the Seoul skyline visible through the unfinished windows. She'd escaped one nightmare. Fallen in love with a dangerous man, survived a kidnapping, and somehow thought the hard part was over. She was wrong. 3 months earlier. Jasmine had signed the lease on the Itaewon property exactly 2 weeks after Jae-sung pulled her from that warehouse. The space was perfect, street level, corner location, big windows that would flood the dining room with natural light. It needed work, needed vision, needed money. Jae-sung had offered to buy it outright. Cash. No questions asked. She'd refused. "I need to build this myself," she'd told him, standing in the empty space with its peeling paint and broken tiles. "With legitimate loans, real investors. If I let you just hand me this, it's not mine. It's yours. And I didn't survive everything I've survived to be handed my dream." He'd studied her for a long moment, that calculating look she'd come to recognize as him reassessing his assumptions. "You're serious?" "Completely. You're stubborn. You noticed." His smile had been genuine, warm, the kind that made her forget he was dangerous. "Fine, but I'm co-signing the loan. And I'm investing as a silent partner, 20% stake. You run it, you own it. But if it fails, we fail together." "Deal." They'd shaken hands like business partners. And then, he'd kissed her like she was the only real thing in his carefully constructed world. Jae-sung had been true to his word. The loan came through a legitimate bank. The investors were real business people, not front companies. He'd introduced her to contractors, designers, chefs, but always as her choice, her decision. And slowly, impossibly, Jasmine had started to believe that maybe they could actually do this. Build something clean from something dirty. Transform violence into creation. She'd moved into a penthouse in Gangnam, Jae-sung's insistence, for security. But she'd paid rent from her own savings until the restaurant income could cover it. Financial independence mattered. It was the line between partnership and possession. Their relationship had evolved into something neither of them had words for. Not quite conventional. Not quite safe, but real in a way that terrified and thrilled them both. He was changing, too. She could see it in the board meetings she occasionally attended, in the way he talked about legitimizing Hanul Group's operations, in the businesses he was quietly shutting down or selling off. It was slow, painful, expensive, and it was making people very, very angry. "Hold up. Before we get into this unbelievably messy story, I need one tiny favor. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Show some support for your girl, I'll really appreciate it." "All right. Thank you. Let's jump back in." The charity gala had seemed harmless enough. Jae-sung needed to attend. Networking, maintaining relationships with Seoul's elite, showing that Hanul Group was becoming respectable. Jasmine had agreed to go as his date. wearing a burgundy gown that made her feel like royalty. They'd arrived together, walked the red carpet together, posed for photographs together, and by morning, they were viral again. The Chairman and the Server. Inside Seoul's most controversial romance. The articles dissected everything. Her background, the slap-heard, round soul, his reputation, the 6-month contract that gossip sites had somehow uncovered, speculation about whether she was using him, whether he was playing some long game, whether their relationship was real or performance. The photos were everywhere. Jae-sung's hand on her waist, protective and possessive. Jasmine laughing at something he'd whispered. The two of them looking at each other like the room didn't exist. The comments section was brutal. Gold digger. She saw an opportunity and took it. He's slumming. This won't last. Interracial relationships never work in Korea. She'll leave when reality hits. He's going soft. The old chairman would never. That last comment appeared hundreds of times, in different variations. He's going soft. Jasmine tried to ignore it, focused on the restaurant, on the menu testing, on hiring staff who believed in her vision. But she couldn't ignore the tension in Jae-sung's shoulders when he came home late, the phone calls he took in other rooms, the way Min-ho and the security detail had doubled, then tripled. "What's happening?" she'd asked one night, finding him on their penthouse balcony at 2 a.m., scotch in hand, staring at Seoul like it was a chessboard, and he was losing. "Board meeting tomorrow," he'd said quietly. "Emergency session. My uncle called it." "Your uncle?" "Kim Dong-woo, VP of Operations. He's been resistant to the changes I'm making." Jae-sung's jaw clenched. "He thinks I'm destroying what my father built, that legitimizing the business is the same as surrendering it." "What do you think?" "I think my father built an empire on fear and blood, and when they killed him for it, I inherited that same target on my back." He'd turned to look at her, his eyes dark and serious. "I don't want that for us. I don't want you looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life, wondering which enemy will come for you to hurt me." "So, you're changing things." "I'm trying, but change has costs." The board meeting happened 2 days later. Jasmine wasn't supposed to attend them. But Jae-sung had insisted she sit in the gallery, the observation area where shareholders could watch proceedings. "I want you to understand what we're up against," he'd said. The Hanul Group boardroom was intimidating, all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling windows, a massive table where 12 board members sat in expensive suits, their faces carefully neutral. At the head of the table, Jae-sung, perfectly composed, every inch the chairman. Opposite him, Kim Dong-woo. Jasmine had never met Jae-sung's uncle before, but she recognized the type immediately. Late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit that screamed old money, cold eyes that assessed everything like a predator calculating vulnerabilities. He looked like Jae-sung might in 20 years if Jae-sung let the darkness win. "Gentlemen," Jae-sung began, his voice carrying authority that made grown men straighten in their seats. "I've called this meeting to present the Q2 restructuring plan. As you know, we've been systematically divesting from high-risk ventures and transitioning toward legitimate holdings." "High-risk ventures," Dong-woo interrupted, his voice dripping with contempt. "Is that what we're calling our most profitable operations now?" The temperature in the room dropped. "Operations that expose us to criminal prosecution," Jae-sung countered smoothly. "Operations that paint targets on our backs. Operations that are unsustainable in the current regulatory environment." "Operations that built this company," Dong-woo shot back. "Operations your father died protecting. And now you want to dismantle his legacy because—" He paused, his eyes flicking toward the gallery where Jasmine sat. "Because you're distracted." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "Careful, Uncle," Jae-sung said quietly, but there was steel underneath the silk. Questioning my judgment is one thing. Questioning my motivations is another. Then let's talk about motivations. Dong-woo stood, commanding the room's attention. 6 months ago, you were ruthless, focused, the youngest chairman in this company's history, continuing your father's work. And then a server slapped you in a restaurant, and suddenly, he spread his hands mockingly. Suddenly you're playing house with a foreigner, talking about legitimacy, bleeding millions in profit to satisfy some misguided sense of morality. Those millions, Jae-sung started. Those millions kept this company powerful, Dong-woo interrupted. Kept us feared, kept us in control. But now, competitors are circling. The Busan faction sees weakness. The prosecutors are emboldened because they sense blood in the water. He leaned forward. You've made us vulnerable. And for what? A woman? Jasmine felt every eye in the room turn toward her. Heat flooded her cheeks, but she kept her expression neutral, her spine straight. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. Her name is Jasmine Wright, Jae-sung said, his voice cold enough to freeze the room. And she has nothing to do with business decisions made for the long-term health of this company. Doesn't she? Dong-woo's smile was cruel. The American girl has made you weak, nephew. Made you sentimental. Made you forget that in our world, weakness gets you killed. He looked around the table. Your father understood that. He did what was necessary, always. And it cost him his life. But he died powerful, feared, respected. He died in a parking garage with 3 bullets in his chest, Jae-sung said flatly. Bleeding out alone because the empire he built was held together by fear, and fear makes allies temporary. I watched my father die when I was 24 years old, Uncle, and I vowed that I would build something that lasted, something that didn't end with bullets and blood. Noble, Dong-woo said sarcastically, but naive. This business, our real business, doesn't have retirement plans. It ends one way. You can die powerful or you can die weak. Your father chose power. You're choosing weakness disguised as virtue. I'm choosing survival, Jae-sung corrected. I'm choosing a path that means when I have children, they inherit wealth, not war. When you what? Dong-woo's eyes gleamed with malicious understanding. When you marry the server? When you play at being normal? Jae-sung, you can't wash the blood off this company with good intentions and a pretty foreign girlfriend. This meeting is adjourned, Jae-sung said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. We'll reconvene next week to vote on the restructuring plan. Until then, all board members will receive detailed financial projections showing the long-term profitability of legitimate operations. He stood, signaling the meeting's end. But Dong-woo wasn't finished. One more thing, nephew. When this restructuring fails, and it will fail, the board will remember who warned them. And when they come looking for new leadership, he smiled, I'll be ready. Jae-sung found Jasmine in the gallery after everyone had left. She was still sitting there, processing what she'd witnessed, trying to understand the chessboard she'd stepped onto. That was your uncle, she said quietly. That was my uncle attempting a coup, Jae-sung corrected. He sat beside her, suddenly looking exhausted. He's been building support among the board, making promises, suggesting that my reforms are temporary insanity caused by, he gestured vaguely, by you. Maybe he's right, Jasmine said. Jae-sung's head whipped toward her. What? Maybe I have made you weak. Maybe your judgment is compromised because of me. She met his eyes. Your uncle isn't entirely wrong, Jae-sung. 6 months ago, you were the chairman. Cold, ruthless, untouchable. And now you're trying to be something else, something better. But what if that's not sustainable? What if your world doesn't allow for better? Then I'll change my world, Jae-sung said fiercely. Jasmine, you didn't make me weak. You made me remember what I was fighting for. My father built an empire and died for it. My uncle wants to maintain that empire through the same methods. But I want— He stopped, searching for words. I want to build something that doesn't require me to be a monster. Something I can be proud of. Even if it costs you everything? Even then. He took her hand. But it won't. I'm not losing, not to my uncle, not to the old ways, not to fear. We're going to make this work. The restaurant, the company, us. Jasmine wanted to believe him, but the look in Dongwoo's eyes haunted her. That cold calculation, that absolute certainty that Jae-sung would fail, and the terrible suspicion that maybe Dongwoo was right. The threatening photos arrived 3 days later. Jasmine had been at the Rose and Lotus construction site, reviewing tile samples with the interior designer, when she'd noticed the manila envelope tucked under a stack of blueprints. No address, no stamp. Hand-delivered. She'd opened it without thinking, and the photos had spilled out like evidence of a crime not yet committed. 6 photographs, all recent. All of her, with crosshairs drawn over her heart in red ink. The note had made her blood run cold. Building something new? Shame if it all came crashing down. Not just a threat to her, a threat to the restaurant, to everything she was creating. Jasmine had called Jae-sung immediately, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. He'd arrived within 15 minutes, Min-ho and a full security team in tow. They'd swept the construction site, checking for bombs, for surveillance equipment, for any sign of immediate danger. Nothing. But the message was clear. Someone knew where she was, what she was doing, and wanted her to know she was vulnerable. "This is my uncle," Jae-sung had said, his voice cold with fury as he examined the photographs. His signature move, psychological warfare before physical action. He wants you scared, wants you to leave, wants to prove that you're the weakness that will destroy me. "Maybe I am," Jasmine had whispered. "You're not." Jae-sung had cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. Dongwoo is escalating because he's losing. The board is actually considering my restructuring plan. His traditional allies are seeing the financial projections and realizing legitimate business can be profitable. He's desperate, and desperate men make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind that get them caught." Jae-sung's smile was sharp, dangerous. "He threatened you. That means he's crossed a line even the old guard won't accept. Family business is one thing. Targeting civilians, targeting you, is another. So what do? We don't let him win. We finish the restaurant. We open on schedule. We show him and everyone watching that we're not afraid. And if he tries something worse, then I'll handle it." The look in Jae-sung's eyes had been absolutely lethal. "He can threaten me, challenge me, try to take my company. But the moment he put crosshairs on your photograph, he signed his own fate." The security detail had started that same day. Min-ho assigned 2 guards to Jasmine, rotating shifts, always 2 of them, always armed. They drove her everywhere, stood outside the construction site, accompanied her to market visits where she sourced ingredients. She hated it, hated the reminder that she wasn't safe, hated the looks people gave her, wondering what kind of woman needed armed bodyguards. But she was also smart enough to understand necessity. Someone wanted her scared enough to run, and if she ran, Jae-sung would chase her, would abandon the restructuring, would return to being the chairman, would prove Dongwoo right. So she stayed. She stayed and worked 16-hour days, perfecting her menu. She stayed and met with investors who asked pointed questions about her relationship with Jae-sung. She stayed and watched the restaurant take shape brick by brick, meal by meal, dream by dream. And she stayed because somewhere in the past 3 months, Seoul had stopped feeling like exile. and started feeling like home. A dangerous home, a complicated home, but home nonetheless. The invitation arrived on embossed cardstock, delivered by private courier to the penthouse. Mrs. Kim Min-ju requests the pleasure of Miss Jasmine Wright's company for afternoon tea. Saturday, 3 p.m., the Shilla Hotel, Presidential Suite. Jasmine stared at the invitation like it might bite her. "Your mother wants to meet me," she said, showing Jae-sung the card when he came home that evening. His expression darkened immediately. "You don't have to go." "Yes, I do. Jasmine, if we're doing this, if we're actually building a life together, I can't keep avoiding your family." She met his eyes. "Your uncle already hates me. Your mother probably does too. But I need to face her. Need her to see I'm not just some gold digger or passing phase." Jae-sung was quiet for a long moment. "My mother is complicated. She loved my father, but she also knew exactly who he was, what he did. And when he died, she blamed his lifestyle, blamed the choices that put a target on his back. And now she thinks you're making the same mistakes. Worse, she thinks I'm making them for a woman." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "She had plans for me. An arranged marriage to a chaebol daughter, strategic alliance, keeping the bloodline pure, the business connection strong, and then you came along and ruined everything," Jasmine finished. "Changed everything," he corrected. "For the better, but she doesn't see it that way yet." "Then I need to help her see it." Jasmine folded the invitation carefully. "Saturday, 3 p.m., I'll be there." The Shilla Hotel was old money incarnate, all understated elegance and impeccable service. Jasmine arrived wearing a simple black dress and pearl earrings, going for respectful rather than flashy. Min-ho escorted her to the presidential suite, knocked once, and stepped back. "She asked to meet you alone," he said quietly. "But I'll be right outside this door. If you need anything, anything at all, you call out." "I'll be fine," Jasmine said, more confidently than she felt. The door opened to reveal a woman who looked like Jae-sung might look if he'd been born female and aged with elegant fury. Mrs. Kim Min-ju was probably in her late 50s, but could have passed for 40. Perfect skin, perfectly styled hair, perfectly tailored hanbok in cream silk. Her eyes were Jae-sung's eyes, dark, intelligent, assessing, and completely cold. "Miss Wright," she said in perfect accentless English, "please come in." The suite was enormous. Living room, dining room, views of Seoul that stretched for miles. Tea had been set out on a low table, traditional Korean tea service, the kind that required ceremony and attention. They sat across from each other, and Mrs. Kim poured tea with movements so precise they seemed choreographed. "Thank you for coming," Mrs. Kim said, handing Jasmine a cup. "I imagine you were nervous about this meeting." "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Fear is honest." Mrs. Kim sipped her own tea, studying Jasmine over the rim. "My son tells me you're opening a restaurant, fusion cuisine." "Yes, ma'am. Rose and Lotus. We open in 2 months." Mrs. Kim's eyes narrowed slightly. "He told me that, too. He talks about you constantly, actually. Your determination. Your refusal to let him simply buy you things. Your insistence on building your dream with your own hands." Jasmine waited, sensing a trap in the compliments. "He admires you," Mrs. Kim continued. "Maybe even loves you, though he hasn't said those words to me directly, and that terrifies me." "Mrs. Kim, let me finish." The older woman set down her teacup with a precise click. "My husband was a brilliant man, ambitious, powerful. He built Hanul Group from nothing, turned it into an empire. But that empire came with costs, moral costs, legal costs, and eventually fatal costs." Her voice didn't waver, but Jasmine saw the grief underneath. I was 22 when I married him. I knew what he was, what he did, the darkness he operated in, but I loved him, and I told myself that love was enough. Mrs. Kim's eyes met Jasmine's directly. I was wrong. Love isn't enough when your husband gets executed in a parking garage by rivals who feared his power. Love isn't enough when your son inherits that empire at 24 years old and has to become a monster just to survive. Jasmine's throat felt tight. I'm sorry for your loss. Are you? Mrs. Kim's tone was sharp. Because you're asking my son to make the same choices that killed his father. You're asking him to legitimize the business, to soften, to become vulnerable in a world that eats vulnerable men alive. Miss Wright, I don't hate you, I don't even dislike you, but I'm terrified of what you represent. My son was safe when he was the chairman. Cold, yes. Ruthless, certainly. But untouchable. And now, her voice cracked slightly, now he's in love, and love makes men careless. Love makes them take risks. Love makes them targets. Mrs. Kim's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. My son inherited the business at 25 after his father's murder. Do you know what that was like for him? He hasn't told me much. Then I will. Mrs. Kim settled back, her eyes distant with memory. Jae-sung was in business school when his father died. He was studying to join the company legitimately, MBA, international business, all the proper credentials, and then one phone call changed everything. She paused, collecting herself. They brought him to the hospital. His father was already gone, and the police— Mrs. Kim's laugh was bitter. The police asked if Jae-sung knew who might have done this, as if they didn't already know, as if the entire underworld hadn't been waiting for my husband to show weakness. What happened? Jae-sung walked out of that hospital and straight into his father's office, called a meeting of everyone important, board members, business associates, competitors, even some of the people we suspected had ordered the hit. And he told them all the same thing. His father was dead, but Hanul Group wasn't. He was taking over. And anyone who thought that transition was an opportunity to challenge him should make their move now. Mrs. Kim's eyes refocused on Jasmine. 3 men accepted that challenge. All 3 died within a week. Jae-sung was ruthless because he had to be, because mercy would have been seen as weakness, and weakness would have gotten him killed. Her voice softened. He became a monster to survive, Jasmine. And for 10 years, that monster kept him alive, kept him powerful, kept him safe. Mrs. Kim stood abruptly, crossing to the window. She stood there for a long moment, looking out at Seoul spread below, the same city her husband had tried to own, the same city that had killed him for trying. When she turned back, her expression had shifted, still guarded, but something had softened. Well, it was nice meeting you. Mrs. Bum. Kim released her hand. The attack started small. A week after Jasmine's tea with Mrs. Kim, the health inspector showed up at Rose and Lotus unannounced. Found violations that didn't exist: improper ventilation, inadequate refrigeration, questionable electrical work. All lies. All documented with photographs and citations that would delay the opening by months, if not challenged. Jasmine had called Jae-sung in a panic. They're shutting us down, saying the whole kitchen needs to be redone. This is going to cost— I'll handle it, Jae-sung had said, his voice cold with fury. Give me 2 hours. 2 hours later, a different inspector had shown up, apologized profusely, explained there had been a clerical error and the original inspector had been disciplined. The violations were withdrawn. Construction could continue. But the message was clear. Dong-woo could reach her even at the construction site, even with guards, even with Jae-sung's protection. Then the permit problems started. Jae-sung fought every battle, made calls, used every connection he had to keep Rose and Lotus on track. But Jasmine could see it wearing on him, The constant firefighting, the realization that his uncle was willing to sabotage a civilian business just to prove a point. The restaurant opening was set for a Saturday in June, perfect timing for summer tourism, for Seoul's food scene at its most vibrant. Invitations went out to everyone who mattered: food critics, social media influencers, business leaders, celebrities, even some of the board members from Hanul Group who'd been skeptical of Jae-sung's reforms, and Kim Dong-woo. Jae-sung had insisted on inviting his uncle. Then let him see what he failed to destroy. Let him watch us succeed. Jasmine had been less certain. He'll cause trouble. Say something. Do something. Probably, Jae-sung had agreed, but we're not afraid of him anymore, and everyone needs to see that. The week before opening, Rose and Lotus transformed from construction site to restaurant. The kitchen gleamed, all stainless steel and efficient workstations. The dining room captured exactly the fusion Jasmine had envisioned. Traditional Korean low tables mixed with Western-style booths, Korean art on the walls, alongside photographs of Lagos, a bar that served both soju and Nigerian palm wine. On the opening night, the restaurant filled quickly. People came curious. They came skeptical. They came hoping for spectacle. And they stayed for the food. The evening progressed beautifully. Critics were taking notes with increasing enthusiasm. The influencers' posts were already going viral. Photographs of dishes that looked museum-worthy, videos of first bites that captured genuine delight. "Beautiful speech," Dong-woo said dismissively, suddenly materializing from nowhere. "But naive, trying to legitimize an empire built on violence. You can't wash that blood off with jollof rice and good intentions. We'll see who's right." He gestured to his associates. "We're leaving. I've seen enough." The emergency board meeting was called for Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Jasmine found out about it Sunday night when Jae-sung came home at midnight, his tie loosened, exhaustion and fury warring in his expression. "My uncle's making his move," he said without preamble. "Emergency session, vote of no confidence. He's calling for my removal as chairman." Jasmine's stomach dropped. "Can he do that?" "If he has the votes." Jae-sung poured himself a scotch, his hand steady despite everything. "He's been working the board for months. Promises of return to traditional profitability, fear-mongering about legitimization, and after the restaurant opening—" He laughed bitterly. "After seeing how successful Rose and Lotus is, he's more desperate than ever. Because if your restaurant succeeds, it proves my approach can work. And that terrifies him." "What do we do?" "We?" Jae-sung turned to look at her. "There's no we in this, Jasmine. This is company business, board politics. You stay out of it." "Like hell I do," Jasmine shot back. "Your uncle made this about me the moment he sent those photographs." "We don't have proof of that." "Then we find proof." Jasmine crossed to him, taking the scotch glass from his hand and setting it down. "Jae-sung, listen to me. Your uncle isn't just coming after your position. He's coming after everything we've built. The restaurant, the legitimization, our future. And I'm not sitting on the sidelines while he tries to destroy it." Jae-sung studied her face for a long moment. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," Jasmine said slowly, "that your uncle made a mistake when he targeted me. Because I've spent 3 months learning how your world works, learning the players, learning the leverage points, and I think I know exactly how to destroy him." Monday morning, 9 a.m. The Hanul Group boardroom was packed, all 12 board members, plus Jae-sung's mother sitting in the shareholder gallery, her expression unreadable. Dong-woo sat at the opposite end of the table from Jae-sung, perfectly composed, radiating confidence. He'd counted the votes. He knew he had this. "Gentlemen," Dong-woo began, standing with the authority of someone who'd already won, "we're here because Hanul Group is at a crossroads. 6 months of legitimization has cost us 70% in profit. Our traditional revenue streams have been eliminated. Our competitors sense weakness. And why? He paused for effect. Because our chairman has prioritized personal relationships over company welfare. He pulled out a presentation. Graphs showing declining profits, charts comparing Hanul Group's performance to competitors, financial projections that painted a dire picture. These numbers don't lie, Dong-woo continued. Under his leadership, we're bleeding money, losing market position, becoming irrelevant. And for what? To satisfy one woman's moral sensibilities? Several board members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up in Jae-sung's defense. We need a leader who puts the company first, Dong-woo said, his voice carrying conviction. Who isn't distracted by personal entanglements, who understands that sometimes difficult choices must be made for the greater good. He looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. I propose a vote of no confidence in Chairman Kim Jae-sung, effective immediately, with myself assuming interim leadership until proper elections can be held. The room erupted in murmurs. Jae-sung sat perfectly still, his expression giving nothing away. Any objections? Dong-woo asked, his smile predatory. Any final arguments before we vote? Just one. Every head turned. Jasmine stood in the doorway, dressed in a sharp black suit, carrying a leather portfolio. Min-ho stood behind her, and behind him, to everyone's shock, 2 police detectives in plain clothes. Miss Wright? Dong-woo said, his voice dripping with condescension. This is a private board meeting. You have no authority here. Let her speak. The voice came from Mr. Park, the senior board member, a man in his 60s, who'd known Jae-sung's father. We've heard your case, Dong-woo. Fairness demands we hear all perspectives. Dong-woo's jaw clenched, but he sat down. Jasmine walked to the table with measured steps, her heels clicking against marble. She placed a folder in front of each board member, 12 identical folders, each stamped with an official seal. 3 months ago, Jasmine began, her voice steady and clear, I was kidnapped, held in a warehouse by men connected to the Busan faction. You all know this story. It was reported in the news, discussed in these very halls. She let that settle, watching the board members open their folders. What you don't know is who gave those kidnappers my location, my schedule, my security details, information that should have been protected, information that came from inside Hanul Group. The room went silent. The evidence in front of you, phone records, financial transfers, security footage, witness statements, all point to one source. Jasmine's eyes found Dong-woo. Kim Dong-woo orchestrated my kidnapping to destabilize his own nephew, to prove that Jae-sung was weak for caring about someone. This is fabricated! Dong-woo shot to his feet. A desperate attempt to... The phone records are from the National Police Agency, Jasmine interrupted calmly. The financial transfers were tracked by the Financial Services Commission. The witness statements were given under oath to prosecutors. She gestured to the 2 detectives in the doorway. These gentlemen are here to verify the authenticity of every document in those folders. Board members were flipping through pages, their expressions shifting from skeptical to shocked to horrified. Mr. Park, Jasmine said, turning to the senior board member, you have 3 daughters. Mr. Cho, your wife volunteers at the Children's Hospital. Mr. Han, your elderly mother lives with you in Gangnam. She let that sink in, her voice dropping lower, more intense. If Kim Dong-woo would conspire against his own nephew, his own flesh and blood, how safe are any of you? If he would orchestrate a kidnapping to gain power, what wouldn't he do to maintain it? The fear was palpable now. She could see it in their faces. The realization that Dong-woo wasn't just ruthless to enemies. He was ruthless to anyone who stood in his way. Today he wants you to vote against Jae-sung, Jasmine continued. Tomorrow, if any of you disagree with his methods, what happens then? Do you become the next target? Do your families? She moved along the table, her presence commanding, despite her relative youth. Jae-sung inherited this company built on violence and fear. He's trying to transform it into something sustainable, something legitimate. Not because he's weak, because he's smart enough to see that the old way has an expiration date. She stopped in front of Dong-woo, meeting his furious gaze directly. You called Jae-sung weak for caring about me, for trying to build something real. But you were so threatened by a server, by me, that you had me kidnapped. She smiled, cold and sharp. Who's really weak, Mr. Kim? A man who adapts and grows? Or a man so terrified of change that he tries to kill it? The silence in the boardroom was absolute. Vote is called, Mr. Park said quietly. All in favor of keeping Kim Jae-sung as chairman, raise your hand. One by one, hands went up. 8, 9, 10, 11. Every single board member, except Dong-woo. Motion fails, Mr. Park announced. Chairman Kim retains his position. He turned to Dong-woo, his expression hard. The board requests your immediate resignation from all positions within Hanul Group, effective immediately. We will be conducting a full audit of your financial activities. Any company assets will be recovered. And these gentlemen, he gestured to the detectives, will be investigating your role in Miss Wright's kidnapping. Dong-woo's face had gone white with rage. He looked at Jasmine with pure, undiluted hatred. You have no idea what you've done, he said quietly. Dong-woo grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, the detectives following close behind. The board members filed out more slowly, several stopping to shake Jae-sung's hand, to murmur apologies for doubting him. When the room was finally empty, except for Jae-sung, Jasmine, and Mrs. Kim Min-ju still sitting in the gallery, the tension finally broke. Jae-sung crossed to Jasmine, his expression a mixture of awe and something deeper. You didn't need me to save you. You saved yourself. Saved us. I learned from the best, Jasmine said, allowing herself to smile. You taught me that power isn't about fear. It's about knowing exactly what people value and what they fear losing. A slow clap echoed from the gallery. Mrs. Kim Min-ju descended the stairs, her expression transformed. Not warmth exactly, but respect. Deep, genuine respect. I underestimated you, she said to Jasmine. I saw a foreign server who'd gotten lucky. I didn't see the strategist, the fighter, the woman strong enough to stand in a room full of men who wanted her to fail and make them respect her. She took Jasmine's hands in hers. My son needs someone who challenges him, who won't let him become what his uncle was. Mrs. Kim's voice softened. Welcome to the family, Jasmine. Truly. 1 year later. Hanul Group's transformation was slow but steady. Profits had stabilized, then slowly begun climbing. The legitimate businesses Jae-sung had invested in, tech startups, real estate development, hospitality, were proving his vision correct. It was harder than the old way, took longer, required patience and strategy rather than fear and violence. But it was working. Rose and Lotus had become a Seoul institution, featured in international food magazines, a Michelin star, reservation lists months long. Jasmine had hired a full management team, allowing her to focus on menu development and the cooking school she'd started in the basement, teaching Korean students Nigerian cuisine and Nigerian students Korean cooking, building bridges, one meal at a time, until one late night in December, after Rose and Lotus had closed following a particularly busy service. Jasmine was in the kitchen, exhausted but satisfied, preparing staff meal, her grandmother's fried chicken, crispy and perfect, Jae-sung was at the stove making his mother's kimchi jjigae, the recipe she'd finally trusted him with. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that came from knowing someone so well that words became optional. "I've been thinking," Jae-sung said, stirring the jjigae, "about what you said, about building something real." "When did I say that?" Jasmine asked, checking the chicken. "About a year ago, after the kidnapping. You said you wanted to build something real on your terms." He turned to look at her. "Rose and Lotus is real. The legitimization of Hanul Group is real. What we have, that's real too." Jasmine felt her heart start to race. "Jae-sung, I don't need a ring or a ceremony to know you're my partner," he continued. "In everything. Business, life, all of it. But—" He paused, and she saw vulnerability flash across his face. "But I want the world to know. I want my name attached to yours legally, permanently, not as your employer, not as your protector, as your equal." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a diamond band. "Marry me," Jae-sung said quietly. "Not because you need me, because you choose me. Every day, the way I choose you." Jasmine's eyes were burning, her throat tight with emotion. "That's not fair. What's not fair?" "Proposing to me when I'm covered in flour and chicken grease and exhausted from a 12-hour shift." But she was smiling through the tears. "You were supposed to do something romantic. Fancy restaurant, rose petals, the whole thing." "This is romantic," Jae-sung protested. "This is us, cooking together, building something together, being real together." "You're right," Jasmine admitted. She wiped her hands on her apron and took the ring from the box. "Yes, obviously yes. Did you really think I'd say anything else?" Jae-sung slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her, like everything about this moment had been inevitable from the second she'd slapped him in that restaurant 18 months ago. They kissed in the kitchen of Rose and Lotus, surrounded by the smell of fried chicken and kimchi jjigae, and it was perfect. More perfect than any fancy proposal could have been. The end. Thank you for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't leave without hitting the like button and commenting what you loved about the story. Subscribe if you haven't, and switch your notifications on. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. We're building a global community of story lovers here, and your voice is part of it. See you in the next one. Have a great day.